Hi, Parashan here, and welcome to today's episode. Now, I've just finished today's workshop locally, where I work with a live environment classroom working with the students. And in this workshop, I teach the concept called the localized digital business. And it's focused on tapping on the local goldmine. Now, let me explain about the local market, and that's where this episode is all about. So most of the time, when we talk about online business, we always think about selling outside of your so-called area, outside of your state, outside of your country. And we're always thinking of selling worldwide, overseas, and so on. And I think it's definitely a good model, but at the same time, there's actually what we call a local goldmine. And the local goldmine can be very profitable. And this is what I'm going to teach you for today. So basically, there are three opportunities in the local market that is basically under your nose that you may or may not see it. Okay, the first one is the concept of serving the underserved lucrative market. There's actually a very hot market happening in where you are, whichever country that you're from, and that is the underserved local market. Now, what do I mean by underserved? In the sense that they are not being served, short and simple. So let's say you are in the self-help niche market. I'm just making this up, right? And who is the top self-help guru today? Well, Tony Robbins, right? But is Tony Robbins' presence in your country or in your particular state and so on? Probably yes or may not, depending on where you're from. So imagine that there is actually a gap there where the underserved market wants this kind of training, but well, Tony Robbins is not reaching the market. So let me give you some example of the definition of the underserved lucrative market here. So for instance, the language. Again, I do not know which country that you're from, but let's say you are not from the English speaking country. Let's say you're not from United States, right? And what about the Chinese language market? Now, that's a huge opportunity there because no one is actually serving the Chinese business owners. So let's take this to another example. So let's say you are in a particular country where it is in English. Let's say you are in United States, right? Well, everybody knows English. But there's still a market in a particular race in that sense. Now, we're not going to get into race, but I'm just giving an example. Let's say the Chinese market. Although they understand English, but would they maybe prefer if there is a training in Mandarin where they can understand very well, they can communicate and so on? Maybe that is their preference. And we're not talking about just ordinary people and so on, but you narrow down to your particular niche market, right? And if you get it right, I think there's a hot opportunity, a gold mine by itself in the local market. The next thing of how you differentiate yourself to become the ideal solution in the local market when you're competing with international brands, it's none other than the personal touch. So sometimes they cannot get a personal touch from an international brand, but you can do that. Again, let me just give you an example. I give a lot of example in the self-help niche because I'm from that industry, I'm from that particular niche. That is the market that I serve. So let's say you are a motivational guru or expert. I mean, you don't have to be that, but let's say you're in that niche. I know it sounds very cheesy, motivational, but I'm just trying to make a point here, right? So they may get trained from, say, a very well-known international motivational speaker, guru, and so on. But this guru, this speaker, may not provide the personal attention, may not provide the personal touch. But here you are, you're the one who can actually give that kind of personal relationship, and that counts. Sometimes what they want is the personal attention, and that's something you can give, and you can build the affinity because, well, you are local in that sense. And the third way of how you can crush the market locally compared to international brands and so on is none other than localization. I know it sounds funny, we're talking about local market and now we're talking about localization. You see, many products that goes all around the world, worldwide products, they may not be identical, or should I say, customized to their existing challenge. So let's take diet example. So if you are in, say, Spain, your diet is totally different. I mean, the food consumption is different than someone in the United States. If you live in, say, Thailand, then again, your diet is not the same as someone living in Spain. Or if you are in Malaysia or Singapore and so on and so forth, do you see that the same diet recipe may not be applicable for someone stay in, let's say, in Malaysia. And I'm giving the example of Malaysia because I live here and it's easy for me to give you an example. So for instance, the food is different, although universally the working hours are the same, but it tends to be a bit longer because of the traffic jam. So let's say someone finished work at 5:30 and he works in a city, in an office building. Probably he will not finish work at 5:30 because of the traffic jam and so on, or the extra work and so on. He may go back a bit later. So let's say there's an ebook that teach about, say, exercise, getting fit and so on, and he says that after work at 5:30 p.m. you're supposed to go for a jog. You see, that kind of knowledge may not be applicable to the quote-unquote local market. So localization is the key, and that's what attract in your local market. So there's this concept of you may have heard this concept where you can be a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in an ocean, right? So which is better? You decide. Both have its own advantage. But right now, I'm just giving you the point where how you can, for the time being or permanently, how you can actually be the biggest fish in a small pond. Alright, with that said, this is Patrick here, and I hope that you pick up some ideas here. Let me know by liking this video or leave your comment there. With that said, this is Patrick here. Again, I look forward to see you one day live in person. Take care.